Welcome to the Jboy Show, hosted by Jake Crain, the fastest growing sports show in the nation.
I'm Coach Hugh Freeze.
This is Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham.
Hey, this is DJ Shockley, and you're watching.
And thanks for watching the Jboy Show.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for hopping in again on another edition of the Jboy Show. Got some more great content. Dipping down to the Auburn wing today, talking with a guy that's about as well-informed as anybody you're going to find. I want to talk some roster stuff as we move into the 2021 season. It may hit a couple recruits. There was some breaking news the day that we're recording this. Tony Fair just committed to Auburn. But first, I do got to give a shout-out to our partners at betonline.ag. Head over there today. The online casino, it's always open. Whether you're betting Major League Baseball, NASCAR, like I say, Quidditch, it doesn't matter. They're going to have the spreads over there. Sign-up bonuses are legit. They play the sharps. They're not going to wait and grind it down. They're going to gamble against you. Got some great props too. No runs in the first inning of Major League Baseball games. If I'm going to take a prop, that's going to be it. So head over there to betonline.ag today and tell them that Jboy sent you. But very excited to have a guy I've known for a long time. Does a really good job at auburnsports.com. He's the publisher, head honcho over there. Looking good in the suit and tie, and always fresh. Mr. JG Tate, J Tate, the Tater, whatever you want to call him. Jay, what's up, buddy?
Jake Crain, man, it's been a minute, and you have grown considerably. Not in size, not in.
Look, I'm trying not to, man. With the
You're
pandemic,
like a big grown-up badass with a show and everything. It's unbelievable.
Well, man, I'm trying to get like you, man. You know, and you know, me and you have known each other for a while, and look, there's smooth, there's bumps in the road, but at the end of the day, man, you know, you're doing your thing. You know how much respect I have for you and what you guys have accomplished over there and what you are accomplishing. It was an honor to have Jeffrey Lee on the show, good buddy, talking some recruiting a few weeks ago. But Jay, I want to start with this roster, and because you know we always talk about in the NFL roster management. This guy's going to replace who, and in college, I think the portal's kind of drawn some more attention to that. But if you look at Auburn right now, talk about number one, your impression of Bryan Harsin so far. And then just kind of the roster that he inherited. And we'll kind of get to as the puzzle pieces get connected as they usually do during this time of year down the road.
Yeah, I think Harsin has done good work so far. Honestly, recruiting-wise, he hasn't really had a chance to because until June starts, he's kind of dead in the water. Yep. And we could talk for a while if you wanted to about, I think he's going to be dead in the water more or less for the whole 2022 cycle. You know, going into that class of 2022, because I think he's so far behind. I mean, if he's going to go and try to beat Kirby or Nick Saban for a recruit and they don't even know who he is right now, a lot of these kids don't know him yet. It's just going to take time to build inertia. So he's got a lot of work to do on the recruiting angle, but I think he has looked at that and said, okay, let me go ahead and work and clean up what I can in house. Let me kind of get in with the fans, with the folks who are Auburn people and the kids that I've got here on this roster, figure out what I need to keep, what I need to purge, try to fill these spots. And I think that's what you're seeing today. You made a mention to it earlier. Tony Fair, the defensive tackle from UAB, has committed to play at Auburn next year. And that's an example of, let's try to fill some holes. Let's try to get a big zero tech guy to come in there and be able to, you know, clog up some of these run lanes.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with them not being able to have visits and camps and stuff like that, obviously, until June. You're fighting with a hand behind your back because, you know, like you mentioned, these recruiting battles didn't start these kids' senior years when you're looking at the 2022, even 2023, which he has more of a fighting chance there, but it's still not nearly as what it's going to be down the road. I mean, these are 3, 4, even 5-year relationships with guys that have been at the same place, and that's really hard to do. And then, Jay, you throw in not being able to show your product on the field yet because, again, I can promise you this, and we're going to win this game and do this and get Auburn back to where they're supposed to be or back in the national spotlight. But until you actually do it, these kids nowadays, and they're not going to, I guess you could say, believe you or be as believable if they haven't seen you. I think those two things are kind of congruent, and you mentioned it. But, you know, his style, Jay, because, again, you've covered coaches. You've seen, you know, their styles. There's different ones. You know, we had Shane Beamer. He said he's still trying to figure himself out. You have CEOs. You have hands-on guys. Do you think Bryan Harsin's brought more of a, and the word I use is accountability. I think it's a good word, but kind of more of a hard-ass attitude. That's what it seems like to me. You're either going to be – there's no flexibility or malleability, I think, with Bryan Harsin, at least so far.
Yeah, I agree with the accountability, and I think that's something that was sliding a little bit with Gus at the time that he was at Auburn. I think some guys got away with some stuff that maybe they shouldn't have, and I think Harsin's cut all that out. Part of that is that he doesn't have any pre-existing relationships with these kids, so maybe he can come in and be a little bit more of a hard-ass. But to me, the thing that's really stood out so far in this tenure, and I know they haven't been challenged a lot yet, is the positivity. There is like unfailing positivity among this coaching staff, all of them. And it starts with Harsin. He is kind of a hard ass, but he's a positive hard ass. He's not the kind of guy to go around and just dog you and rag on you. he'll talk to you privately if he's unhappy. And it's just a lot of positivity out in the public space. And I think with the players too, it's like, even when they're messing up, we're not going to crawl ass. We're going to instruct, and we're going to let them know. I want every player on this team to know that I've got their back, and they're loved and they're appreciated here. I not to rag on Gus specifically for that, but I think that's kind of a new way of thinking. If you look at it all the way across the board, if it's every coach, if it's the way Auburn's going to do things. And I think that's what you're seeing with Harsin.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think, not saying that Malzahn didn't tell the truth, but I think Harsin is really letting everyone know where they stand, regardless of how you played. They evaluate the tape last year, guys coming back, because you got to set the standard early. I say it all the time. You can always start hard and get easier. You can never start easy and get harder. It doesn't work like that. And looking at the team, and I want to get to the makeup of the roster on offense and defense and kind of look at what we're going into in the 2021 season. But another thing that stood out to me, Jay, and I'd love to pick your brain about this as a guy obviously who's heavily involved, is the recruiting strategy of this staff. It seems to me that they're recruiting at more of a national level, not saying they're skipping the guys closer to home, but the honest reality is, Jay, Auburn hasn't been able to get the guys competing against Nick and competing against Kirby, especially up front on the offensive line, especially at the tackle position. You look at defensive end. Do you think Harsin is recruiting nationally almost as a backup strategy to since they're not able to create any momentum right now on the field, they continue to lose out to Georgia and Alabama, the guys closer to home? And do you think that is something that Malzahn's staff didn't do? There was really no fallback other than a guy down the list. I kind of like that strategy. It's a little bit new to me.
I don't necessarily look at it as a backup strategy. First of all, I agree with you. They are recruiting way out of their zone right now, geographically speaking. I mean, they've got a kid from Portland, a wideout they really want. And there's going to be more, definitely going to be more.
Northeast, New York, I think they got an offer out there too as well.
So they're kind of going out. And Angelo Blackson, I mean, they got him, got Angelo from Delaware. So I mean, they've done a little bit of that before. Yeah. But I think your point is a good one. They're so far behind right now trying to catch up. If you're going to battle Georgia, you're going to battle Alabama. Come on. I mean, you're going to know right now the kids you might be able to win that battle with, and the other ones you got to just give up. So I think they're just trying to recruit out west because they know out west. Bert Watts, he knows California. Brian Harsin's recruited California. Schmedding is recruited California. And Brad Bedell as well. That's what they know. And so I don't look at it necessarily as a secondary plan. I think it's just the better of their two plans right now because they have some familiarity with those kids out west. But as they can create some momentum closer to home with guys like Cornelius and Zach and Carnell, then it switches to where I think they go both. 2 or 3 years from now, when I think they can compete in Georgia for kids,
agree.
You'll still see them mess around with California.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, why not? Let's be honest. Look at the two starting quarterbacks at Alabama and Georgia right now. They're both from modern day out in California. So it's not like the SEC. The SEC really, and you could say a little bit of the Big 12, maybe close as much as the SEC, the Big 10, not so much, are going to get all these West Coast kids. To me, I think that's one of the biggest. And I had Frosty Rucker on here, former standout at USC, and he's like, listen, all the good players from out West are coming here. And until that's stopped, you're going to continue to see that more. And I think Huddle had a big deal to do with that, obviously being able to recruit nationally and stuff like that. But, Jay, have you seen this kind of movement from out West? I mean, you look at Najee Harris, you can go down the list of players in the SEC that are coming from that coast to this one to be able to put themselves in the best chance to play in the NFL.
Yeah, why not? I mean, this is where the money is. This is where the hype is. This is where the facilities are. And we've seen in the draft, this is where the draft picks come from. They come from the SEC. Alabama obviously done a great job, as you mentioned. And I think Auburn definitely wants to get get theirs. This staff is definitely more West Coast oriented than the last one. They have some really strong ties. So I think for a while, at least, you're going to see Auburn kind of get their tentacles into some kids out there on the West Coast and pull in kids like you mentioned, California, Oregon, Washington State, Nevada, et cetera, et cetera. There are some good players out there. They're going to fight a little bit with Oregon and USC and UCLA maybe, but they're going to win some.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, kind of seeing if a pipeline opens there. But, Jay, talking about the staff, and it was a perfect segue, man. It's almost like you've done an interview before. It's a perfect segue into my next question about the staff. And something I talked about, and you guys did a great job, obviously, breaking down when it was happening with the coaching search and stuff like that, is kind of the balance on this staff. Not just geographically. You mentioned guys like Watts and that are from different places. Then you look at guys like Cadillac and Zach that are more local and Cornelius. When you look at the staff, starting with the coordinators, let's talk about Mike Bobo first, and this will kind of scheme us into what they're going to do. What do you think about the coalescing of Mike Bobo's offense and Brian Harsin's offense? Because for us to sit here and talk about it, Jay, it's easy for us to talk about, say, hey, Brian Harsin's going to combine his offense with Mike Bobo. But when you're installing it and you're having to do that for the first time, it's pretty tough. What did you think about the Mike Bobo hire and the way that the staff was put together geographically?
Geographically good. Mike Bobo, I like it. He's a guy who develops quarterbacks. He's been doing that for a while, and Auburn needs some. Bo Nix needs some. Really needs someone who knows what they're doing there. And I think you've seen some dividends from that. Mm-hmm. I think Mike Bobo is going to be good at that. The thing is, I want to see the harmony that's created between Bobo's vision for offense and Harsin's vision for offense. I mean, Mike Bobo works for a guy who's got some strong opinions about how offense needs to run, and we're definitely going to see some play action. A lot more play action, a lot more under center. And I do believe the hype. I've been hearing it since Tuberville got here, and he promised us Rufus French. I think we're going to see some tight ends like for real this year. I think we're going to catch some actual passes. And the word I'm getting is that Landon King's going to be the one to watch.
I really think, and Jay, I don't mean to digress, but I think it's a great point. Him as a young guy, and then Hal Presley coming in as a young guy is another guy I think is going to have a chance to play. It has the physicality, has the size. We'll see how it translates early. But no, and it's funny, watching the spring game, we simulcast it on here, and the first play, and obviously it's by design. All we've heard since Harsin's got, hey, we're going to start throwing the tight end more. You're going to see, we're going to get in 12 personnel and actually have a progression that involves the tight end. And I'll be damned, Jay. First play of spring, they go under center, run a play action, and hit a tight end on the over. I couldn't believe it. I had to walk outside to make sure there wasn't a meteor shower that was coming to impact just North America. But again, Jay, ball, man, the tight end is a huge matchup problem. And Auburn's had good ones, but it seems like the tight ends that Auburn had in the past weren't good until they started throwing the ball in the NFL, i.e. CJ Uzoma and guys like that. So when you look at that, when you looked at the spring game, my question is this. Is the biggest question on Auburn's offense the balance, or is it the ability to develop Bo Nix? Because I think there are two different questions, and we'll get into the offensive line in a second. But do you think we'll actually see Auburn use the tight end? Let me start there.
Yeah, I do believe that. And I wrote down on my notes here, Gus was allergic to tight ends. He loved talking about he wanted good matchups. But I think in his head, a matchup was always lateral agility and acceleration versus size. Why didn't he take some of those tight ends you alluded to, some good ones he had along the way? CJ's a great example, who's obviously proven himself as an outstanding tight end in the NFL.
Yeah.
Still making a lot of money, even though he didn't get much run at Auburn. He never saw that as a great matchup. If you could overpower somebody inside, him against an inside linebacker, that's a win.
Yeah.
Get the ball to him, and he's going to give you 10 yards or 20 yards. But Gus is always thinking, well, we can juke him on the outside. We'll get real fast. We'll get real
That's
quick.
Actually a good impression, Jay. That's actually pretty good.
I like your show. It's pretty good.
Boom.
So I think that Mike Bobo and Harsin understand that you can have a disadvantage or create a disadvantage with a tight end. It doesn't have to be fast. It can be strong and smart.
Yeah.
I think that's what they've got at tight end, specifically Landon King, also Brandon Frazier, and there's some other guys too.
Yeah.
So I do think we're going to see that. Yeah. I think that's going to be a fairly common thing we see every game,
I agree. And I think that bleeds into Bo Nix's development. There's nothing that helps out a quarterback more. I mean, we've had Jason Campbell on here, the tight end, and Jason Campbell was screaming at the most. I mean, throw to the tight end, a guy that actually played the position. It's a security blanket. And what they were able to do when he was playing, I mean, Anthony Mix, even though he's considered a wide receiver, I mean, he pretty much lined up as a tight end in line on the end of the line of scrimmage. But Jay, I want to talk about personnel on offense because again, you can have the best scheme in the world. You can have the best ideas, but if you don't have good enough players, it doesn't matter. On the opposite side, you can have the simplest scheme, and if you have the best players, you got a chance to win. But when you look at this roster, and it all starts with the offensive line, that's the heartbeat. And I don't want to forget Brandon Council because he's a huge piece. I think if he's healthy, he's Auburn's best offensive lineman. And I'll say that again, not only because of the way he plays, but his versatility. If Brandon Council, and take him out of this, with the roster they have right now, do you feel like Auburn can be competitive throughout the season offensively with the offensive line, even with Tank back there, Jay?
That's a good question, Jake. The most important thing here is this. About a month and a half ago, we asked Bobo straight up. I think it was Bobo, maybe Harsin, offensive line. Are you good with what you got? And the answer was going to be, we're holding what we got. Yeah. Which I found strange because I didn't think this offensive line was up to it. Like you were asking me if they can make it through an SEC season. This group that I see right now, I think they're missing a left tackle. I don't think they have one, and I think they need one. So when they said about a month and a half ago, we're going to hold tight, I thought, man, I think that's a mistake. Well, there's word now as we try to look into it, Jeffrey Lee and I, trying to dig into what they're trying to do with this transfer portal. we've come to find out they are kind of in the look for a left tackle now. So I think they've wised up. I think this team is a pretty good run blocking team, the SEC average-ish.
Yeah,
I've got an outstanding total badass at tailback. So I think it's going to be like the Giants of the early 90s where they just run the football and play defense. But pass pro, man, we talk about Bo Nix's development, and we think he's going to get better. He showed a little bit in the A-Day game anyway. But I don't think these guys can pass pro. They're going to have to get somebody on that left side who's really, really good at that. And are they out there?
See, that's the thing. And we talk about the portal all the time, and you're really beholden to the portal. And the question is not just, all right, do we go to the portal? It's obviously what's in the portal. And it's not just physical, it's mental. Because these guys got to make checklists to go to a place like Auburn. You do your background check. And Brian Harsin, because it's almost like a catch-22, in my opinion. It's as a new head coach, it's great that you can go to the portal, even though that 25 rule, it's a problem. You know, I talked with a bunch of coaches, being able to only have 25 in that certain time frame when all these guys can leave is a problem. The math doesn't add up. But, it's on one front, you're Brian Harsin. Hey, I'm coming to a new place. The portal's basically free agency, especially once they pass that SEC rule, which I think they will in May. And I think you'll see Donovan Kaufman follow pretty quickly, maybe even before that. But it's not like you can just say, all right, well, we're going to lose 8 guys and replace them with 8 guys. That's not how it works. But Jay, to your point, it surprises me they weren't looking earlier, because if you look at FCS that's still being played right now, there's almost like a glorified tryout once they get done with it being in the spring, and you can't tamper and stuff like that, but there's other ways. But are you disappointed, Jay? Because I always go back, and again, I'm not trying to beat up on Gus Malzahn's staff or whatever, but it is what it is. You have guys like Brendan Coffey there who you signed out of junior college, Killian Zarrere, guys that are really just eating spots right now until they're able to do it. But I think you hit it right on the head, Jay. Not being able to pass protect means a couple things. One, you have to water down the passing game. You got to start throwing in more quick game. 2, you have to change your protections. You can't just go big on big. You have to slide more. You have to chip with the tight end. You got to go in max pro and bring in 2 tight ends to help protect. I'm just wondering if you're Mike Bobo in there right now without a tackle, if you're looking almost banging your head against the wall saying, listen, I want to do all these things conceptually and routes and progressions, but if you can't pass protect, it doesn't matter. And as well as I do, Jay, Bama and Georgia and LSU, these guys coming off the edge are first rounders. It's isn't a walk in the park. Is Brandon Council a guy, do you think if he's healthy, they can plug in at left tackle?
I don't think so. I like him inside more. I like him as a guard more, or even as center. I mean, Nick Brahms will be the guy, but I think Council's better inside. I don't like him in space as much. And the guys you mentioned, McKillian Zero, we haven't gotten anything out of him yet. Yeah. Brandon Coffey was okay-ish last year. Alec Jackson was, if you're looking at Pro Football Focus, if you put anything into that, he was below average. And he's coming off a big injury now. And are you going to trust Troxel? If it's a fully healthy Troxel with no knee injuries, yes, he's an absolute road grader. But at this point, he's had 3 major knee injuries. It's hard to bank on a guy like that, although he could certainly do it. There's a lot of questions. And you mentioned about the passing game. It limits what you can do if you can't pass pro. And even if they got let's just say there's a mythical kid at FAMU who's a great left tackle, and you get him in the transfer portal in May. That's one. That's great. What about the other 4? Yeah. You can't fix those. Yeah. You got to have it, Jay. You got to stay with at least 8 or 9, especially nowadays in today's game when you're watching teams like Georgia rotate 10 defensive linemen in the first half. You've got to have at least 8 when it comes down to offensive line that you feel good about, and have some swing guys like you mentioned. And I agree. Putting Brandon on the edge, while it may be better than what you got, to me, it's almost like Brodarius. You're asking him to do something that when he goes to the next level, he's not going to do. They're going to take Brodarius Ham and they're going to put him right into guard when they get to the NFL, because that's what he is. And that's what Brian Harsin has to deal with. Real quick, I do want to let everybody head to the jboyshow.com, grab some merch. Also subscribe, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you're checking it out. Always dropping content to help you win the water cooler. That's the jboyshow.com. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever it is. Make sure you're checking it out. Here with Jay Tate, publisher of auburnsports.com, a good friend of the show. Some great stuff. I know the audience is going to love this, Jay, especially as we're galloping toward the season. You and I both know it'll be here before we know it. But looking at the defensive side, you lose Handy, you lose Hardy. That was obviously in the news.
but you move Pegues over there, which I think once he gets some reps, he'll be fine. But I'm starting to look at this Auburn defense. I want to start up front, Jay. It's starting to look pretty sporty, especially if they get Donovan Kaufman. They can kick Ladarius Tennyson down to nickel. You get Tony Fair that you can plug in the middle. I think Truesdale's going to come back. Derek Hall has a chance to be all SEC once Nick Eason gets his hands on him, as he has with that athleticism. And then there's Colby Wooden. The defensive line, Jay, and there's a few more guys out there that have announced they're going to transfer. It's starting to look like the defense is going to be the strength of this team.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that, which is weird. I love what they're doing on the back end. I mean, you mentioned, if you get Kaufman, that moves LT down, and I love him in the nickel spot or full-time nickel spot. You got to love the linebackers.
Yeah.
You could argue 4 or 5 really good impact linebackers that are SEC starters. So that's great there. Defensive line, you're a little more optimistic than I am. I love Colby Wooden. I do. Derek Hall's got a little ways to go. Truesdale was okay.
Yeah, he was disappointing last year.
He's a little disappointing last year. Tony Fair, he's going to be making a jump up, I think, in competition level. So we'll see how he adjusts. But he's certainly a big boy and athletic, believe it or not, considering his size. So those are there's some big pluses there. But you know how it is, man. In the SEC, your second team guys matter a lot.
100%.
Got to be able to rotate. And right now, JJ Pegues is a guy you might have to be looking at zero tech or one tech. I don't know, man. That's asking a lot. And I think he's a great kid. He's a physical specimen. I think he's going to be a stud in time, but is he ready to help right now?
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if he is. I'd be shocked.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. And I think sometimes people think it's kind of backwards. JJ Pegues right now, if you played next weekend, I think you could only use him on 3rd and 9 pass against situations and put him in that interior and let him rush the passer. Because we all know, if you can get pass rush from the interior, Derek Brown made Marlon Davidson a whole hell of a lot of money collapsing that pocket inside and flushing that quarterback to his side. That's why you saw it. And Marlon Davidson's a hell of a player. I don't want to take anything away from Marlon. Big cat too. Shoot, when Derek was playing, you'd see offensive tackles sack the quarterback on accident because the quarterback's having to bail out there so quick. So I can see that. And look, until some of these guys get out there, and you're right, Jay, on the field and actually show it at this level, it's kind of guessing. But I see Derek Hall making a big jump. I just see the athleticism. I'm a big Nick Eason fan. I thought that was one of the most underrated hires that they've made. Just like talking to these recruits, they love the NFL pedigree. That's something Tony Fair talked about on the show, having Nick Eason coming straight from the NFL. Not a guy that was there 30 years ago that these kids have never heard of, but he has relationships with guys that are present and current in the minds of these guys, not only in the transfer portal, but in recruiting. And yeah, we're going to have to see. Colby Wooden, I think, is going to end up being a first-round draft pick. I watched him, Jay, last year, and we all know what he could do against the pass. We saw him play against the run. He covered one of Northwestern's, I believe, wide receivers, or it may have been a flex guy, on a wheel route down the field, was running step for step with him. That guy, to me, was a huge find. But looking at the linebackers, Jay, we know how talented they are. You look at Owen, you look at Zacoby, and Zacoby's gained some weight, I've heard, which is going to be huge for him getting paid coming out this next year because he's going to have a shot. But looking at the back end, and let's say Donovan Kaufman's coming and you're able to kick Tennyson. You look across the board at corner. You got Roger McCreary, you got Jalen Simpson, you got Drayshawn Miller, you got Smoke Monday at safety, could get Donovan Kaufman at safety. Derek Mason's going to have some pieces to play with, Jay.
Yeah, I think he was shocked. I think he really was shocked by the depth of the talent that he had on the whole defensive group. And Kevin Steele, to his credit, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit, and most people do understand that, but he was so good at layering his roster. He'd have the guys that are obvious starters. He'd have the guys that are challengers, and then he'd have 2 or 3 levels of guys below that in the development stages. And every position, he's got that dude set up just like that. So when Derek Mason walks in, he's got it set up exactly the way you want it. You got some young guys that have been challenging. You got some old guys who have the reps. It's perfect. And I think Derek Mason has been really surprised by how developed that roster is. Again, I've got some questions up front, but in the defensive backfield at linebacker, it is absolutely flush with dudes that have played, that are good, that understand what they're doing. And I think LT at nickel, he's made for that spot. That's what Kevin always wanted to do with LT. So
that would be nice. And he's a headhunter too. Tennyson is not afraid. He's unbelievably physical at that nickel position. Scares me sometimes, especially his old DB coach getting thrown out the game early targeting. There's a few times Ladarius came in there pretty hot. I know they're going to work on that, but it's so hard to take a guy's stinger away like that because that's the way that they play. But Jay, probably a question you haven't gotten, and it's so early, and I don't want to already talk about coaches leaving, but do you think there's a chance that Derek Mason's at Auburn for more than a year? Yeah,
there's a chance. I could see it going 2.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect anything beyond that because I think he's going to be really good. I think
I think so
players. And, I think it's setting up to be a really great year for him professionally. And good for him. I know he got his brains beat in at Vanderbilt for the most part, especially in this last year, but
yeah,
he's a good coach, man. And he's going to prove that, and he's going to get a better opportunity and move along.
Yeah. I was shocked, not shocked that he ended up, deciding to go to Auburn, but that it kind of happened the way it did in the fashion, the way it did. I mean, at one point we had him and Marcus Freeman and 2 or 3 other guys that were in the running. It's about as good a defensive coordinators you're going to find in the offseason this past season. But Jay, great stuff, man. Awesome on football. I do want to shift a couple questions to basketball, if you don't mind. Because again, you talk about the portal. We think the portal in football and basketball, it's an absolute madhouse right now. I think the number's at close to 2,000 players that have been in the portal. And you look at Bruce Pearl retooling this roster, just what you've seen, and I'm going to ask about Scoot in a second, but from what they've brought in with Zep Jasper, you look at Wendell Green, Walker Kessler, and I know it takes time to coalesce, but with Jabari Smith Jr. coming in as well, even without Scoot Henderson right now, it's a pretty talented roster, and I think Bruce is trying to go on the revenge tour here in 2021.
Well, yeah, for sure. And it's weird to think there were some people that were questioning Bruce, 2-3 months ago, like, this team isn't any good. You're like, give him a minute, man. Come on now.
Yeah.
And there's been an uptick in chatter here in the last week or so about JT. If you'd asked me a month ago, I thought JT Thor was completely gone.
Agreed.
And now I think there's a scenario where he stays. So if he were to come back, that would be even more. But yeah, they got a lot of dudes, and I think they're going to be able to put this thing together pretty quickly. Basketball is a little different than football. I think you can put these guys together pretty quickly. So BP said yesterday at the Ambush Tour that they're going to be doing a lot more, kind of just playing together and doing some 5-on-5 types of pickup stuff so they can kind of get to know each other and learn how each other plays in the full court and stuff like that. Because they're going to be seeing some new faces. They got to find a way to get Walker Kessler involved, and he is not a back to the basket kind of guy. No. He's a transition, spot up, big old 7'1" dude that can shoot threes. So they got to find a way to work him in and just kind of learn what he can do. He and Jabari together are going to be an absolute madhouse.
It's a tree festival down there at the 5 and the 4. And you're right, Jay. I mean, he's not a guy. This isn't Tim Duncan. He's not going to back a guy down and hit the little turnaround off the glass from 6 feet. He's a trailer to hit the 3. He's a guy you can go 5 out. To me, it almost kind of reminds me, and he hadn't shot a great percentage. Hadn't taken a ton of 3-point shots in college, but we know he can shoot it. How surprised were you, Jay? Because we all know the Walker Kessler saga coming out of high school. I mean, it was pretty much everybody thought Auburn, pretty much done deal, goes to North Carolina on a visit by himself, commits without his parents. And then it got iffy again in the transfer portal with him in North Carolina, with the new hire they made there. Were you surprised to see him choose Auburn with all the stuff that was going on? We had heard Gonzaga and stuff like that. And how big of a get is that for Bruce Pearl and Auburn? Because again, there's not a lot of 7'1" guys running around that can do the things he can do really in transition, which fits BP perfect.
It's a huge get. People have been talking about it, and I think it's worth everything you're talking about. I mean, Jabari to me is probably a better player.
I agree.
But Walker is an awesome guy to add. And I'm not surprised. I felt like he should have gone to Auburn in the beginning, and you kind of alluded to that in your intro there, that I didn't understand why he chose North Carolina, because it seemed like it was coming down to Georgia and Auburn was way ahead, and all of a sudden North Carolina swung in there. And I think Roy Williams kind of sold it on, look, it's North Carolina. I mean, this is where Michael Jordan played. This is where James Worthy played. I mean, we've done all this. And Auburn has, a couple good years. And why would you go with 2 years when you've got 52 years we've done in North Carolina? I think that swayed him. As soon as I heard talk that he was going to be leaving, I have a feeling it was going to be Auburn because he's kind of righting a wrong in a sense. That's where he belonged. I mean, I'm seriously. Yeah. And Georgia just kind of dropped the ball the whole way. He's a Georgia legacy.
Yeah.
I mean, in a perfect world, he goes to Georgia. If they got a good coach and everything's going well, but they don't have a good coach and things are not going well, and just open the door for Auburn. I think he's going to be a tremendous player here.
I think he will too. And to me, there's a few big questions in college sports, Jay. Number one, how Texas can't be successful or win at least 9 to 10 games every year with the resources they have and the reach they have blows my mind. And how Georgia cannot be dominant in basketball in the SEC with all the talent. I mean, I'm in Buckhead right now. I could go out, take a left, and I could probably go 20 miles in each direction and find at least a 4 or a 5-star. And we all know that Bruce Pearl has made a living in Atlanta, really, and Georgia. And it's surprising to me. And we had J.J. Frazier on here, all SEC guard, really good player. He used to torch Auburn when I watched him play against Auburn. And he said, he really believes it's the head coach, Jay. It's that To coach at Georgia, you have to understand Georgia kids. And he gave Bruce Pearl so much credit on being able to come into a room at a kid in Atlanta and really be himself and make that kid feel comfortable. It shocks me Georgia's not better. And then yesterday, KD Johnson gets in the portal, one of their best players last year.
Yeah, and BP, I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, he's so good at connecting with kids and parents and coaches and aunts and uncles, all of that stuff. He's an incredible personality, and he sells Auburn constantly. And you know, it's one of the things that I always think about when I think about recruiting. When Walker Kessler and JP were on their recruiting visits here, you know, the main guy that was recruiting those guys was Kevin Steele. Kevin Steele went everywhere with them when they were on campus and stuff. And it's that synergy that you love to see at Auburn. It's something that Bruce fostered with the old staff, and he's kept it going with the new staff. So I just love the way that, like, if there's a big basketball recruit and BP thinks there's a football coach that would really relate to him, they just get them helping.
Yeah.
And similarly with football, Harsin will get BP to meet with some guys. I love that synergy, man. You didn't ask about that, but it just kind of came into mind.
No, that's a great point. I mean, you think about how that could have helped, you know, last year with a guy like Kool-Aid if Brian Harsin was in here and they're really using each other. Not that Gus didn't, but Bruce is just unbelievable. I'm sure that Brian Harsin, one of the first people he went to when he got to Auburn was Bruce Pearl, because he just gets it, fan outreach, momentum, community. That's the only way you're going to win at Auburn in basketball. Now that you've won a little bit, Auburn's a place where you can win a lot once you start doing that. But Jay, last question for you, buddy. I know you got to run. People would absolutely grill me if I didn't ask you about Scoot Henderson. Not going to ask if you think he's going to Auburn or the G League, because, again, I think that's still up in the air. I still feel like he goes to Auburn, but just the player. Number one, do you think there's a chance that he goes to Auburn with this G League stuff? We all know how crazy that's been, the Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga saga, all that stuff. But then the type player that he is, because if Auburn adds him to this roster, I mean, this guy is an above elite level scorer for his age, and he's 6'3".
Yeah, so they would love to have him. They've been wanting to have him, begging him for a long, long time. And I think if Scoot had told them no, they would have already filled this spot.
Yeah, I agree.
Whatever they're going to do with it. They've technically got two. I think they really want to get one for sure, and then they'll worry about the other one later. But now you know it's down to Scoot in the G League. To me, I think he's probably leaning G League. And Auburn's got it set up nicely. They got two full-time point guards, so they're not going to be caught like they were last year, having to go with someone like JP for so long. And kind of got caught there. He didn't expect Shareef to have the problems that he did as far as getting on the court, staying on the court. But to me, yeah, Scoot would be the best option they have at point guard. Absolutely. He's explosive. He's above the rim. He gives you incredible size and length. To me, he's like Derrick Rose, that type of player. I think he's going to end up in the G League is just my gut feeling. I always mention this too. His younger sister, Crystal, is going to be an absolute stud. When she comes up, I think she's a class of 2023 or 2024 point guard herself. And I bet Auburn would love to get Scoot and then his sister later on and make that a big story. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And you know, there's been some back and forth, Chan, whether he'd have 2 years, you know, if he came to Auburn. Because you remember the Kyra Lewis deal where he wasn't old enough. I've heard that he will be at Auburn for 2 years. Then you look at the Team USA website. It looks like he'd only have to be 1 year, whatever. Have you gotten any clarity on that, or is it still kind of whatever?
I haven't gotten any clarity on that.
I haven't either. It's amazing. It's like trying to find the snuffleupagus, man.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. But no, man. But Jay, I really appreciate it, brother. Tell everybody where. Yes. But no, man. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media, Twitter, Instagram, wherever, and where they can go to find auburnsports.com. You, Jeffrey Lee, Brian Matthews, all you guys do a really good job.
Yeah, thanks, man. And used to be part of the team too. Once upon a time.
Yeah, once upon a time, man. You never know, dog. You never know. Me and you, we're here talking. We're here talking.
Word. Again, I'm Jay Tate. I'm publisher at auburnsports.com. You can check us out at auburnsports.com. And we have a great message board called The Bunker, which is a very, very active community and a very sarcastic, funny community. So check us out there. And on Twitter, I'm JG Tate.
Yeah, definitely.
Sir.
Well, Jay, I appreciate it, brother. Stay safe out there. We need to do this more often, man.
All right. See you again.
All right, buddy. See you. All right. Thank you guys as well for joining us. Make sure you subscribe, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Get some of the merch from the jboyshow.com. It's been another episode of the Jboy Show with JG Tate from auburnsports.com. And we are gone.
The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, Technical Director Dave Hammock, Creative Director David Culbertson, Audio Engineer Feyzan Shareef, Production Assistants Blaine Crain and Kyle Orr, Executive Producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, Steve Chamberlain, and David Cohn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, thejboyshow.com for updates regarding our newest apparel and merch designs. Win the water cooler with The Jboy Show.